The last time I saw him in person, he was standing between me and the only way out of that gym, and staff already had the police on the phone before I had to say a word. Because 8 months earlier, this same man was the single most flattering thing that had ever happened to me. And if you've ever met someone who felt like they were your soulmate, you already know exactly how hard it is to feel your heart drop when you get hit with a major warning. So here's the question I actually wanted to answer. How does the best thing that's happened to you end with gym staff calling the police? There's one detail in this story that still makes my stomach drop, because it proves John knew something about me that he had no right to know, and I'm going to show you exactly when I found it, and it's not what you're thinking right now. 8 months earlier, this was just my Tuesday night. I'd been going to the same gym at the same time for 2 years, same corner squat rack, same too heavy warm-up I had no business attempting. And my dating life had been the same rerun for about a year. Nice enough men, zero spark, and a running joke in my group chat that I'd cancelled 4 second dates in a row for forgetting they existed the moment I closed the door after the first date. That's when I noticed this guy at the barbell rack next to mine had the same water bottle as me, same brand, same design, and he laughed when he saw me noticing, then introduced himself as John and said he'd just grabbed whatever looked good at the store that week. Fair enough, coincidences happen. Then it was at the coffee shop, the coffee order, oat milk latte, extra vanilla, an oddly specific thing for 2 strangers to both ask for at the same counter. Then the book sticking out of John's gym bag, the one I'd mentioned once in passing to a total stranger I'd just met. Then, a week later, he played me his favorite cut from a band nobody's heard of, 400 monthly listeners, and it was the exact same song I'd posted in a story 2 years earlier that got maybe 9 views. At the time I thought, what are the odds? I want to be honest about how good this felt. It felt like the universe had been quietly building someone for me this whole time, and if you've never felt that, I hope you do, because it's a genuinely wonderful feeling. So was this actually fate, or was it something else? Psychologist Ramani Devatsula calls people who do this masters of mirroring. Study someone closely, then reflect their interests back at them so precisely it feels like fate instead of homework. Psychologists have another name for why it works so well on the person receiving it. Self-verification theory says we're wired to seek confirmation of what we already believe about ourselves. So when a stranger seems to already agree with everything we love, our brain reads it as proof, not as a pattern to question. Over 6 weeks, it wasn't just the gym anymore. John discovered my pottery class, the one advertised only inside a private group with 11 members. He started running the same sunrise route I'd posted about exactly once, at exactly the same time I run it. He joined my book club the same week the group finally let in a new member for the first time in 6 months, and he'd somehow already read the month's pick twice. When I told my mom about him, she said, in the exact tone only a mother can manage, "A man who likes everything you like isn't your soulmate, sweetheart. He's your reflection, and reflections don't have their own personality." I told her she watched too much television. I mentioned the coincidences to my friend Priya over coffee, half joking, and she went quiet and said, "Mary, that's not a meet cute, that's a case file." I laughed it off, and she reminded me she'd said the same thing about my college roommate's now ex-fiancé 3 years before anyone else noticed anything wrong, so her track record on this specific instinct was, annoyingly, undefeated. I never gave him my work address. Yet, 3 days after that comment from my friend, John was standing in my office lobby holding my exact coffee order, telling the front desk he was just stopping by to surprise me. 2 nights later, I looked out my window and he was standing under the streetlight across from my building. Not moving, not hiding, just watching. That's the night I called the police for the first time, and that's the moment this stopped being a strange story I'd tell at parties. So the first time I called, an officer told me one guy showing up somewhere isn't a crime. He was right, legally. What I didn't know yet was that across town, that same week, a different folder was still growing. John wasn't finished. He just didn't know yet that mine already had a detective's name written across the front of it. If you've made it this far, subscribe, because what a detective told me later changed how I understood every single one of those coincidences. After that night, I slept with the lamp on and a kitchen knife on my nightstand, which is genuinely embarrassing to say out loud. I didn't tell Priya. I didn't tell my mother. Some small, humiliated part of me still believed that if I said it out loud, it would make me the kind of woman this happens to, instead of just a woman it was happening to. That week, I skipped my usual Tuesday gym session, told no one, and went Thursday instead at a different time than normal. He was already there, different day, different time, no plans between us, standing at my corner rack like it was any other Tuesday. That's when the feeling in my chest changed. He hadn't guessed a single thing about me. He'd been studying me since before I even knew his name existed, and every coincidence at that gym, every hobby he'd discovered had him studying me. I didn't cry, which surprised me. What I felt was closer to the feeling of realizing a stranger has been standing behind you in a mirror this entire time you've been getting undressed. I went back through every single one of those coincidences that night, one by one, and not a single one of them felt like luck anymore. They felt like footage I'd been narrating for him. So, what actually turns an annoying ex into a criminal? Stalking law requires what's called a course of conduct, 2 or more acts that show a pattern, not one isolated incident, aimed at a specific person that would make a reasonable person afraid. One coffee shop coincidence is nothing. A dozen instances over months and standing outside my home is a pattern. But the pattern wasn't the only thing that made me go quiet. Now, there was a detective involved. The detective mentioned there's even a federal statute for exactly this when it crosses state lines or moves online, Title 18, Section 2261A, and that she'd worked cases where a stalker's own archive of digital files became the strongest evidence the prosecution had, because the victim never had to prove anything. The detective found a folder with my name on it inside John's phone. It had screenshots from my posts on an Instagram I deactivated years ago. My old coffee order, my song story, a photo of my dad's watch from a post about losing him, all saved and organized into folders by date. She informed me this could end up being the strongest piece of evidence in the entire case because he built it himself. She also told me why so few women in my position ever get this far and what actually separates an admirer from a stalker. Less than a third of stalking victims ever report it to police at all, mostly because it doesn't feel like a crime while it's happening. It feels like an ex who won't take a hint, or in my case, a soulmate who turned out to be a master of mirroring. An admirer wants you to notice him. A stalker needs you to never stop thinking about him, and he'll manufacture as much fate as it takes to get there. And the difference isn't intensity, it's whether he can hear the word no and actually mean it. Then she told me one more number before I left that police office. Roughly 1 in 3 women will experience stalking in her lifetime, and nearly half of all victims say the worst part isn't any single incident, it's not knowing what happens next. Which brings us back to where I started. The last time I saw him in person, he was standing between me and the exit by my corner rack, telling me none of this meant what I thought it meant, that he'd just always felt a connection to the things I loved. Gym staff ended up calling the police before I had to say a word. 2 or more acts, a specific target, a reasonable fear, all 3 boxes checked, and a judge granted the order with my name on it. I'm still not entirely used to how ordinary that sentence sounds out loud for something that took a digital folder to prove. I called Priya from the courthouse steps. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just said, "Come over, I've got wine and not one water bottle in this apartment that looks like yours." And honestly, that's the first time in months I laughed without checking over my shoulder first. 3 months later, I went back to my corner rack. Same gym, same time, same Tuesday, same too heavy warm-up. Nobody at the rack next to mine had a water bottle that matched mine, and for the first time in almost a year, that felt like exactly the right amount of coincidence. I still have the receipt from that lime green water bottle. It's paper-clipped inside this folder, Exhibit 14, because the same week John coincidentally bought one just like mine at the same shop is a date a detective could put on a timeline. I still lock the door and check it twice. I still glance at the parking lot before I get in my car. That part hasn't fully gone away, and at some point I stopped waiting for it to. So here's the law I walked out of that courthouse with. If someone knows you before you've told them anything, that was never chemistry. That's homework, and homework leaves a paper trail. Here's the part I still don't have an answer for. Nobody's ever confirmed whether that folder was the only one or whether somewhere there's a second folder, still being updated, still watching a different woman who thinks she just got really lucky. If you want to see how far this kind of manufactured intimacy can actually go, I lived through a different version of it before this, and I performed a 30-day experiment of saying yes to my partner who turned out to shock me, and I put the whole experiment in the video linked right here. Go watch that one next and hit subscribe, because you're going to recognize more of it than you think.